The smell of a Gulf Coast hospital at midnight is its own particular punishment. Antiseptic over mold, floor wax over the salt that never fully leaves the air this close to the water. At Coastal Pines Medical Center in Pensacola, Florida, that smell had soaked into the walls so deeply that even the day shift carried it home in their clothes without noticing anymore. Nora Callahan noticed. The other nurses called it her 1,000-yard stare. They said it behind her back, the way people say things they know are unkind but cannot quite stop themselves from saying. That Callahan, she gives me the creeps. Always watching, never laughs. Did you see the way she held that drunk guy last Thursday? The one who swung at Marcus? She stepped in from nowhere and had him against the wall before security even stood up. Said she slipped. Said it was an accident. Nobody believed her, but it was easier to pretend they did. Nora was 36. She looked older in the bone structure, the way people look older when they have spent years in places that were not kind to them, but younger somehow in the movement, efficient and economical in the way of someone who had learned that wasted motion could cost you things you could not get back. Her hair was dark and pulled tight in a bun that never came loose during a 12-hour shift. Her scrubs were always the plain standard issue blue of the floor nurses, never the printed ones the younger staff wore, never anything that asked to be looked at. She kept her sleeves down. Under the left sleeve there was nothing but skin and a scar along the radius that she told the employee health nurse was from a car accident. Under the right sleeve, on the inside of the forearm where the veins ran close to the surface, there was ink. Small, precise, black. A single set of wings, rendered with the kind of detail that took a very specific tattooist who worked for a very specific clientele, and beneath the wings, 7 letters that spelled a word that meant nothing to anyone who had not earned the right to understand it. Phantom. And below that, a row of numbers that were not decorative. On the floor of Coastal Pines Medical Center, Nora Callahan was known as competent, unsettling, and entirely beneath the notice of anyone who mattered. She had cultivated this reputation the way a gardener cultivates a hedge, deliberately, patiently, with attention to every detail. Dr. Raymond Voss had a different word for her: liability. He had disliked Nora Callahan from her first week. Dr. Voss appeared in the doorway of the break room with the expression he wore when he needed an audience, and had correctly calculated that he had one. Night crew. He said it like a category, not a greeting. I need the trauma bays reconfigured before midnight. We have a group of VIP cardiac patients coming out of the cath lab, and I want the bay layout consistent with protocol, not whatever arrangement the evening shift left it in. Jerome woke up with the practiced immediacy of someone who had learned that being asleep when Voss was speaking cost more than it was worth. Nora did not move. Voss's gaze found her in the corner with the accuracy of a man who had been aiming at her specifically from the moment he walked in. Callahan, Trauma Bay 2 needs restocking. I found it short on chest seals during the last code, and that is a charting failure on the night crew's part. Nora set down her coffee. She had stocked Trauma Bay 2 herself at the start of the shift. She had counted everything twice. The chest seals had been there. It was stocked at the start of shift, she said. I have the count sheet. Voss smiled the smile of a man who had found the thread he was looking for. A count sheet from the beginning of shift does not account for what happened during the shift, does it? If supplies were used and not replaced, that is an ongoing responsibility. If you are unclear on that responsibility, perhaps we should revisit your orientation records. He said this in front of 6 people, and 6 people looked at their shoes. I will check the bay, she said. She walked past him without looking at him and went to do it. In Trauma Bay 2, she checked the supplies she had already checked. Everything was there. She pulled the count sheet from the folder clipped to the wall and initialed it again at the bottom with the current time, which was 23:51, and which was 5 minutes before the night changed entirely. She felt it before she heard it. That was still the truest thing about her, the part that 3 years of careful invisibility had not managed to erase. A change in the pressure, a frequency in the floor that did not come from the HVAC system. She straightened up from the supply cabinet with the count sheet in her hand and stood very still and listened to the building tell her what was coming. Heavy rotor, twin engine, low and fast, Not the light medical helicopter that used the rooftop pad for standard medevac runs. Something bigger, something military, and not one of them. 2. The first Blackhawk came out of the dark Gulf air like something the night had been holding in reserve. It flared over the far end of the lot with its landing light cutting a white saber through the salt haze, and the rotor wash hit the hospital windows hard enough to rattle the blinds on their tracks. It was not using the rooftop pad. It was landing in the lot because someone on that aircraft had done the math on time and distance and chosen the fastest option, which meant someone on that aircraft was running out of both. The second Blackhawk was already banking into approach 50 feet above the first. Behind her, the trauma bay intercom crackled. All available staff to the emergency department. We have inbound military aircraft. This is not a drill. All available staff to the emergency department. Then she turned from the window and walked toward the ambulance bay doors, and the shoulders that spent every shift slightly rounded, slightly inward, slightly apologetic to the space they occupied, were square. She did not run. Running was for people who were not already certain of what they were going to find. The bay doors were open by the time she reached them, the night air pushing in warm and smelling of jet fuel and salt water and the iron edge of blood. The first team was already through. 4 men in wet fatigues with no unit markings, carrying a litter between them with the smooth, urgent economy of people who had done this in worse conditions, and at the center of the litter, a man whose chest was doing something wrong, the right side lagging, the neck muscles standing out with every labored breath. Behind them came a 5th man. He was moving without carrying anything, which meant he was the one doing the looking. Tall, sandy-haired, mid-40s, with the kind of face that had stopped being young so gradually that you could not identify exactly when it had happened. His eyes went across the emergency department in one flat sweep that took in everything and filed it and moved on, and when those eyes reached the cluster of staff in the bay entrance, they stopped moving and started searching. He said one thing. He said it loud enough for the whole bay to hear. I am looking for Ghost. Someone in this building has that call sign. I need them in Trauma 1 right now. The department looked at each other. The name meant nothing to anyone. Except it was not nothing. It landed in the air of that bay and changed the temperature of the room the way a single note changes the feeling of a piece of music, and everyone present felt it, even if no one could have said why. Voss materialized from the direction of the nursing station, moving fast for a man who had been composing himself in a doorway for the last 40 seconds. I am the department chief, Voss said, placing himself in the path of the sandy-haired man with the authority of someone accustomed to paths clearing in front of him. Whatever you need, I am your point of contact. What is his status? The sandy-haired man looked at Voss the way you look at a door you need to open. Tension pneumothorax, penetrating trauma right upper chest, he said. We have had him 40 minutes in the aircraft. He is deteriorating. He needs decompression now, not imaging now. And I need Ghost. That call sign is attached to a medical specialist who your hospital is showing as a current employee. Where are they? Voss drew himself up. I am familiar with every clinical specialist on this staff, and I can assure you that no one here uses military call signs. If you tell me what training this person supposedly has, I can match it to credentials. The man on the litter seized. It was not a dramatic convulsion. It was the particular terrible stillness of a body shutting down one system at a time to protect the ones that were left, and the team carrying the litter recognized it, and their movement changed, became faster, became the movement of people who had lost the margin they had been working within. Nora was already at the litter. Tension pneumothorax, she confirmed, her voice flat and level. Trachea deviating right. He is maybe 3 minutes from cardiac arrest. She looked up at the team, not at Voss. I need a 14-gauge needle and I need it right now. The sandy-haired man stopped moving. He looked at her with the specific attention of someone who has been looking for something for a long time and has possibly just found it. His eyes dropped to her forearm. Her sleeves were still down, but the way she had said 3 minutes was not a floor nurse's voice. It had a different architecture, and the way she was standing over the litter was not the posture of someone asking permission. Who are you? He said. Not a challenge, almost quiet. Someone who can keep him alive if you let me work, Nora said. Voss stepped forward. Callahan, step back from that patient. You do not have authorization to. 3 minutes, Nora said again. She said it to the litter, to the man on it, to the team surrounding it. Not to Voss. She was already moving toward the supply cart. She did not ask. Her hands found the 14-gauge angiocatheter, the way hands find things they have reached for 10,000 times in the dark. The sandy-haired man made one decision. Let her work, he said. Voss said something. Nobody in that bay could afterward remember exactly what it was. ACT-2. The escalation. The needle went in. Nora drove it into the second intercostal space at the mid-clavicular line with the flat certainty of a woman who had performed this procedure in the back of a moving vehicle in a country whose name she was not allowed to say in any official document, and the sound that came out of the catheter, the sharp, angry hiss of trapped air finding its exit, was the best sound in the trauma bay, and everyone who had been in trauma bays long enough to know what it meant, exhaled at the same moment. The man on the litter, whose name the team had given as Reeves, took a breath that went down both sides of his chest. The tracheal deviation began to correct. Numbers, Nora said to the monitor tech who had materialized beside her. Tell me where we are. Pressure 70/40 and coming up. O2 sats at 81, climbing. They brought 2 more. A woman in her 30s with blast injuries to both hands, the kind of careful wrapping on them that said someone with training had done the packaging, and a man who was conscious and furious about it, a broad-shouldered operator named Tate, who had taken fragment strikes to his left thigh and was currently arguing with the team member, trying to keep him on the litter. I can walk, Tate was saying. You have a piece of aircraft in your leg, someone told him. I have had worse. Nora met them at the door. She looked at the woman's hands first, then at Tate's leg, did the arithmetic, made the call. Bay 1 for her, Bay 3 for him. She looked at the woman, burns and blast to both hands. I need plastic surgery on call now. Not in 30 minutes, now. She looked at Tate. You, she said, you are going to stop arguing and let us look at the leg, because if the fragment is where I think it is, you are one wrong movement from a femoral bleed, and that is not a recoverable situation. Do you understand? Tate looked at her with the expression of a man who was accustomed to being the most dangerous thing in any room and was recalibrating. Yes, ma'am, he said. It was the first time anyone at Coastal Pines Medical Center had heard those words directed at Nora Callahan. It would not be the last. He was smart enough to understand what she was doing. She could see it in the set of his shoulders. She did not have time to care what he did with the understanding. It was during the stabilization of Tate's leg, 45 minutes into the longest shift Coastal Pines had seen in a decade, that the administrator arrived. She walked to Voss, because Voss was the physician of record and the path of least institutional exposure. Raymond, she said, low enough that it was meant to be a conversation and loud enough that it was not. What is happening in my emergency department? Mass casualty intake, Voss said. Military personnel. We are managing it. Who authorized the intake? We are not a designated military trauma facility. There are protocols for this. They landed in our parking lot, Voss said. The alternative to intake was watching people die outside. He said it with the exhaustion of a man who had just spent 45 minutes watching someone else be right about things. There was something almost plaintive in it. And her, Merritt said with a precision of gaze that required no additional words, because Nora was the only person in the room who required specification. She is a staff nurse, Voss said. She is performing physician-level interventions, under my supervision. Ms. Callahan, you understand that your actions tonight represent a significant departure from your defined scope of practice. You understand that this hospital's legal position. The fragment is adjacent to the femoral artery, Nora said, still looking at the leg. If I stop to have this conversation and he moves, we lose him before I can redirect the bleed. I am available to discuss institutional positioning in approximately 8 minutes. Can this wait 8 minutes? Merritt stopped. The operator named Tate, lying on the gurney with a piece of aircraft in his thigh and more dignity than most people achieved in a lifetime, said, Ma'am, I would really appreciate it if you let her finish. Merritt stepped back. She found a wall to stand against. She crossed her arms, she watched. 8 minutes later, Tate's leg was stabilized, the fragment isolated against the vessel wall, pressure dressing holding. She looked up, stripped the outer gloves, and looked at Donna Merritt. "You wanted to speak to me," she said. "Ms. Callahan," Merritt said. "I need to understand what is happening here. You have 3 critically injured service members who are alive because of the decisions made in the last hour," Nora said. "One requires urgent surgical consultation." She nodded toward Reeves in Bay 1, whose pressure was holding, but whose chest would need more than a needle before the night was done. "One requires a plastic and hand surgery specialist for blast injuries. One is stabilized pending imaging to confirm the fragment position. Those are the clinical facts. And your qualifications for the decisions you made tonight are currently above your clearance level," Nora said. And she said it without arrogance, as simply as she might say the supply cabinet is the second door on the left. Merritt blinked. Nora looked at her, then she looked at Voss, who had drifted to the edge of the bay, and was standing with his arms at his sides and his face arranged in the expression of a man renegotiating something large. She looked back at Merritt. "I understand you have a process to follow," she said. "I understand that process exists for good reasons and that tonight created a situation the process was not designed for. I will document everything I did and the reasoning behind every decision, and I will answer any question the medical staff office or the board wants to ask. I will do all of that. But right now there is a man in Bay 1 whose chest needs a surgeon, and I do not have a surgeon, and what I do have is the next hour and everything I know. So I need to ask you to make a decision." Merritt looked at the bay, at Reeves, at the monitor numbers that Nora had been watching without appearing to watch throughout the entire conversation. "What decision?" Merritt said. "Let me keep working, or get me a surgeon in the next 20 minutes. Those are the options this night is offering. I will sign whatever you need me to sign in the morning, and I will do it without a lawyer present if that makes it cleaner for you. But I need an answer in the next 90 seconds. The room waited. Donna Merritt looked at Nora Callahan, floor nurse, 3 write-ups, sleeves always down, and saw something she had not been prepared to see. She said, "Keep working." And she pulled out her phone and started making calls because the woman in front of her had said 20 minutes and she believed her. ACT 3, the breaking point and the arrival. Nora put the phone down and looked at Bay 1 and did the arithmetic and did not like the answer. The ultrasound found what she had been afraid of finding. A small pericardial effusion, early, not yet causing tamponade, but present and unhappy. She looked at it on the screen for 4 seconds, memorized it, recalculated the timeline. She looked at the sandy-haired team leader, who had remained in the bay throughout, and who she had decided to think of as the decision-maker of the room, even though the room belonged to a hospital and not to him, because he was the one whose investment in the outcome was undeniable, and whose judgment she had assessed as sound. "He is building fluid around his heart," she said. "It is small and it is slow. The surgeon will be here before it is a crisis if the surgeon is here in 20 minutes. If the surgeon is not here in 20 minutes, we will need to talk about options." He looked at her. "What options?" "I can drain it," she said. "Pericardiocentesis. Needle into the pericardial space. It is a procedure that carries risk, and it is categorically outside the scope of a registered nurse, and I have done it twice before, in conditions that made this room look like a spa. It will not fix the underlying injury. It will buy more time. I am telling you about it now so that if we get to that point, the decision is not being made under panic." He was quiet for a moment. The monitors beeped their steady conversation with the room. "How much time does the drain buy?" he said. "Enough for a surgeon if one is coming," she said. "Not enough for one who is not." He pulled out a phone. He stepped to the far corner of the bay, and he spoke for 90 seconds to someone whose name he did not say, and when he came back, his face had the quality of a man who has used the last significant resource available to him. 12 minutes, he said. Nora looked at him. Someone with a boat and a truck and a personal connection to a surgical resident who had been one of his people 2 deployments ago before she left the teams for medicine, he said. "She lives 8 minutes from here on the water. She is already moving." Nora looked at the monitor. 12 minutes was within the margin. Barely. Tell her I need a thoracic-trained pair of hands and a willingness to document whatever she does as consultation under the attending of record. Tell her I will explain the rest when she gets here. He relayed this. There was a pause on the other end of the call, then something that sounded like laughter, brief and startled, and then agreement. She turned around. The sandy-haired team leader was standing 6 feet away. He had not made a sound crossing the bay floor. Old habits, both of them. He looked at her forearm. Her sleeves were still down. She had kept them down through everything, through the needle and the assessment and the ultrasound and all of it, through 18 months of Florida summer with her sleeves at her wrists because the ink underneath them was the last private thing she had. She looked at his face, at the grey eyes and the particular weariness in them that was not exhaustion from a single night, but the accumulation of years of looking for something and not finding it. She reached down and pushed her sleeve to the elbow. The tattoo was small, precise. Black wings folded around 7 letters, and beneath the letters, numbers. Phantom. The team leader looked at it for a long time. Nobody in the bay moved. Somewhere in the hospital, a monitor alarmed and was silenced. Somewhere in the parking lot, the second Blackhawks rotor ticked in the cooling night air. Nobody told you, she said. When it happened, nobody in the chain bothered to pass it to the people who had worked alongside her, because passing it required acknowledging that the chain of command had allowed something to happen that the chain of command preferred not to acknowledge. No, he said. We were told there was a training accident and a casualty report and that the file was classified pending review. The review never finished. She watched understanding move across his face the way weather moves across water. We buried an empty name, he said. 4 years, she said. He exhaled. It was a small sound, and it carried a great deal. There is a man in Bay 1, she said. I need the next 12 minutes. We can do the rest of this after. He looked at her for one more second. The look of a man who has been searching for something and has found it in the place he did not think to look, and is reconciling the finding with the years of looking. Then he stepped back and said, 12 minutes, and posted himself where she needed him posted, which was out of the way. The surgical resident arrived in 11. Her name was Dr. Amara Solis, and she came through the ambulance bay doors in running clothes with her hair still wet from getting off a boat, carrying a bag over her shoulder that clinked with the sound of instruments, and she looked at the room in the specific way of someone who had trained for the worst and was recalibrating toward merely very bad, which was a relief. Nora met her at the bay entrance. Penetrating chest trauma, she said. Tension pneumo decompressed 40 minutes ago, holding. Pericardial effusion developing. Currently small, currently compensated. The fragment is in the right upper chest, and I believe it is against the pulmonary artery. He needs a thoracotomy, and he needs it before the effusion becomes a tamponade. The attending is Dr. Voss, his name on the orders. I will assist you. Solis looked at her, at the tattoo on her forearm, which was visible because Nora had stopped pulling the sleeve down. Who are you? Solis said. Currently the person who kept him alive until you got here, Nora said. Can you work? I can work, Solis said. They worked. 40 minutes after Amara Solis came through the door in wet running clothes, the bleeding source was controlled. The effusion was drained. Reeves was going to need days in the ICU and weeks of recovery, and a permanent reminder in his chest of the night the Gulf tried to keep him. But he was going to get those days. ACT 4. The payoff. Nora had not slept. She was at the nursing station charting when Donna Merritt found her, and charting with the specific completeness of someone who understood that every decision she had made in the last 8 hours was going to be reviewed by people whose job was to find the decisions problematic, and who had decided that the best response to that was documentation so thorough it would take a dedicated team a week to read. Ms. Callahan, Merritt said. There will be no termination proceeding, Merritt said. There will be no referral to the Board of Nursing. The write-ups in your file from Dr. Voss are under review pending a medical staff inquiry that he himself has initiated. She paused. He came to me at 6 this morning. He asked to initiate the inquiry himself. I do not fully understand that, but I am inclined to consider it, as my attorney put it, a significant mitigating gesture. Nora looked at her for a moment. "What do you want to know?" she said. "The Navy is sending someone this morning," Merritt said. "To correct the record officially, I have been asked to ensure the relevant personnel are present." "What time?" Nora said. 9, Merritt said. Nora looked at the clock. It was 7:42. "Then I have 90 minutes to finish this charting," she said, and picked up her pen. The conference room at Coastal Pines Medical Center held 12 people at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, and the quality of the quiet in that room was different from the ordinary quiet of conference rooms, the way the quiet after a storm is different from the quiet before one. Nora was there. She sat at the middle of the table, not at the head of it, not at the foot, at the middle, where she could see everyone and be seen by everyone, which was the last thing she had ever wanted in this building and which she had come to accept as the price of the night she had chosen. Her sleeves were still up. He said all of this, and then he opened the folder, and he placed in front of Nora a document that she had been told about by the team leader at 5 in the morning in the parking lot beside the Blackhawks, standing in the gold of an early sunrise, and that she had looked at for a long moment and said, "I do not know what to do with that." The document was a military decoration citation. The decoration was a Navy cross. The captain read the citation in the careful voice of someone who understood that the words he was reading represented events that no one in the room other than one person had witnessed or could fully imagine, and that his job was to read them with the weight they deserved without attempting to inhabit them. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action during a classified operation," he read, "Lieutenant Commander Nora Callahan, United States Navy, serving as combat surgical specialist with a Special Operations Task Force, maintained her station under direct enemy fire for 11 hours following the catastrophic collapse of a forward operating base, performing emergency surgical interventions on 14 critically wounded personnel with severely limited supplies, instrumental in the survival of 11 of those personnel under conditions that exceeded the reasonable limits of individual endurance. Her actions, conducted at sustained personal risk and without relief or reinforcement, represent the highest traditions of the naval service and the selfless commitment to the lives of her fellow service members that defines extraordinary valor." The room was very quiet. Voss was looking at his hands. Nora was looking at the middle distance, the specific gaze of someone hearing their own history read back to them in a room full of people who did not know it and were now understanding, all at once, what they had been sharing a building with. The captain finished and looked up. "On behalf of the Department of the Navy," he said, "Lieutenant Commander Callahan, I offer this institution's formal gratitude for your service, the service record's formal correction, and this decoration, which should have been presented 4 years ago." He placed the case on the table in front of her. Inside it, on blue velvet, the medal, dark ribbon, bronze cross, the anchor and eagle and stars. Voss stood up. He did not look at the captain. He looked at Nora. The room noticed and went very quiet in a new way. "I have written a formal statement for the medical staff office," he said. His voice was level and stripped of the register that he usually performed in. "It catalogued my conduct toward you over the past 18 months. It identifies each instance that I can recall where my professional behavior toward you was motivated by factors that had nothing to do with clinical performance. It includes my personal assessment that your clinical performance was, throughout your employment here, superior to the standard I publicly assigned to it, and that I knew this and used my position to obscure it." Nobody moved. He was looking at her, still looking at her. He sat down. The room breathed. The team leader was at the window looking at the parking lot where the Blackhawks had spent the night, and were now being prepared for departure by a ground crew that had materialized from the Naval Air Station with the efficiency of an institution that understood when it owed a debt. He heard her behind him the way she heard everything, with the part of you that never fully goes off duty. "4 of your 5, he said. "I will find the 5th. "I know you will," she said. He turned around. He looked at her for a long time, at the tattoo visible on her forearm, at the decoration case she was carrying in her left hand, at the building behind her, at the 3 years she had lived in it. "The Navy has a training command that has been asking for a combat surgical specialist for 2 years, he said. "Pensacola, NAS right up the road, reserve status. You keep your life here, the work here, and 1 weekend a month you help us build the next generation of the people who are going to be in the back of the next aircraft that goes into the water." She looked at him. "Reserve status," she said. "Reserve status," he confirmed. "You do not go anywhere you do not choose to go. You are not a resource, Nora. You are a person who happens to know things that matter." She considered the Gulf, visible from the lobby window, flat and gold in the morning. "One condition," she said. "Name it. The 7 names on the operational record. The 5 who are living. I want access to the correct file. The one that does not say what was written in the discharge documentation. I want the true record." He did not hesitate. "Done," he said. "I will have it within the week." She looked at him. "Then yes," she said. On her way back through the department, she passed the nursing station, where Sylvia was coordinating the end of the night shift handover. Sylvia looked up at her, at the decoration case, at the forearm, at the woman who had walked into this building 3 years ago as a folded thing and was walking out of this moment as whatever she actually was. "Charge nurse," Sylvia said. "The position has been open for 4 months." "I know," Nora said. "I should have offered it to you before now." "Yes," Nora said. "You should have." Sylvia smiled. There was something in it that was not just a smile, that was an acknowledgement of a debt that could not be paid in full, but could at least be named. "The night shift schedule comes out Thursday," Sylvia said. "Then I will check it Thursday," Nora said. She walked to the ambulance bay doors and pushed them open and stood in the sunlight on the ramp where the night had delivered things she had not asked for, and that had changed the shape of everything, and she stood there with her sleeves up and her forearm bare in the morning light, reading the 7 names the way she read them every morning, quietly, one by one, in the voice that was just for them. When she finished, she tucked the decoration case under her arm and went back inside to do her job. The schedule came out on Thursday. The night shift of the emergency department at Coastal Pines Medical Center had a new charge nurse, and every single person on the roster had asked to work it. And